Ahoy! Hashtag Zach here. Today I'm going to compare and contrast the militaries of classical Greece and ancient Rome. First, it's important to note that we're not comparing what would happen if they went head to head and actually fought, because that did happen in history and Rome won. It was not even close. However, Rome had some great advantages that Greece did not. Greece had just gone through a major war right before, and so was exhausted, and the Roman military is just much larger. What I'm going to do today is compare their organization and their tactics to see how their management of the weapons and military affairs compared.
One very important factor to consider is technology. Both civilizations had almost identical levels of technology, from their weapons, especially their armor, to the engineering they had at their disposal. Also, communications over long distances and political powers were very similar between the two times.
Now, let's get into the differences.
These are hoplites, Greek spearmen. They acted like militia. They were civilians during peacetime and soldiers during wartime.
Although the Greek use of militia for their military, as opposed to professional soldiers, did have very significant political benefits, such as a weakened central government as opposed to greater freedoms for individuals, it did have some significant drawbacks in combat, as the soldiers weren't professionals and didn't have much training.
This is a phalanx. It was the primary military formation used by the Greeks because it only required one trait from its soldiers: discipline.
These phalanxes were extremely effective because they would go against a disorganized opponent as a united front, and the opponents would not even be able to get close to the Greeks as they would have their long spears ahead of them, and there would be no holes in the line as the Greeks would be in one large unit.
However, the phalanx did have significant weaknesses. Take another look at it. What do you think would happen if it hit rough terrain and the infantry had to maneuver over rocks or walls? Or what if they were attacked from the side? How easy do you think it would be for all of them to shift their spears quickly? As you can imagine, this did lead to some severe problems if they encountered circumstances they weren't prepared for.
In contrast to the Greeks, the Romans did have a professional military. Their soldiers were soldiers for their careers. This had a significant impact on their fighting ability, as they could do much more training, which could allow them to do many more flexible maneuvers, and it allowed them to do certain things that the Greek military could never hope to do.
As you can see, the Roman formation was much more complicated than the Greeks. It was divided into many different units, and lots of them had different roles and purposes once the combat began. The front line would be composed of light infantry equipped with light throwing spears. The next line would be equipped with small swords, called a gladius, and would use these to defend anyone who got too close to the line. The next line would have javelins, 2 for each soldier, so that they could either throw them as projectiles at opponents far away, or spear opponents who got too close. At the very rear would be the elite soldiers, who would defend any gaps that would open in the lines, or against any attacks that would come from the sides or rear. They were the most feared and powerful legionaries.
While these professional Roman formations would be much better than a Greek phalanx on rough terrain, in an open field, a phalanx would still rule the day. This is where the Roman legionaries' professionalism really has its benefits.
Roman soldiers were trained not only as warriors, but as engineers, and they could design military weaponry and defenses in the field immediately before a battle. Whenever the Romans set up camp anywhere near enemy forces, they would always set up parapet walls around this camp. They would have watchtowers at regular intervals for throwing down projectiles, and they would even have series of pits and holes and spikes on the ground immediately outside to thwart any attackers from charging in a phalanx formation. The Romans would also construct powerful weapons of war, such as ballistas and catapults, to launch heavier projectiles at their opponents from across the walls.
Overall, we can see that Greek and Roman militaries were very different because they were completely different types of militaries. The Greeks were a peasant militia that would use discipline and some short amounts of training to try to overcome their opponents that would hopefully be disorganized, while the Romans were a professional fighting force that not only used more advanced tactics, but also used engineering to their advantage.
Something important to consider, too, is the purpose each military was fulfilling. The Greeks were a network of trade cities that each needed militaries only to defend what they had, which was the port city. The Romans, on the other hand, were an empire that was geared towards conquering land and extracting wealth via slaves. Therefore, the Greeks relied on defense for riches, while the Romans relied on conquest, meaning they both had ideal militaries for what they were trying to do.
So, if you're ever asked the question, which military was better, the Greeks or the Romans, you can say, better at what? I hope you learned something new. Please comment, like, subscribe, and come back for more videos.